Welcome back to our show. Today, as promised, we are talking all about our cohorts. So I'm going to explain what a cohort is here at Starfish Social Club. And then Ramiro is going to lead most of this conversation because he's the one that's actually in charge of our cohorts here. So of course, I will jump in here and there because I just can't help myself. But that's how our conversation will be flowing today. Cohorts are a program that we have here. It is open to students who have been at Starfish Social Club for at least a year. So that's the only criteria for students to be able to be in a cohort. We currently have 2 cohorts. We've had 3 in the past. Currently, we have 2. We have one that's middle school and one that's high school and older because students can stay here past the age of 18. So those are the 2 different cohorts that we have. Each one of our cohorts comes together every other week for 2 hours. The first time they come together, it is their planning session. This is all kinds of executive functioning skills all rolled into one evening. As a group, they get to decide what they would like to do together. We live in a big city, so there's lots of options here for things that we can go do together. They get to decide as a group. So Ramiro facilitates the discussion, but he is not the decision maker. The group is the decision maker. They need to do some research and figure out what are the hours. Is this place even open on the days that we go on our adventures? How much does it cost? Is there anything specific that is needed in terms of clothing? Are there weather requirements? Are there age restrictions? Are there certain features that might cost more or that might not be open? All kinds of things to think about just to actually make a plan. So sometimes the plan can take up to an hour just for the group to come to consensus on what we're doing and then get all the logistics and the planning done. Then the second time they come, we actually go do the thing. So they all get their own transportation and then they meet us, Ramiro and I, at the thing that we are doing, and then their parents leave. So this is, if you think about neurotypical kids, they might be going to these places with somebody else's parents, right? They might be invited to go to places like this with friends. High school students or older would be going on their own. They would be arranging their own meetups and going together without parents. So Ramiro and I serve as the surrogate parents on these adventures so that our students can have a similar experience, but without their parents having to be involved. Because for a lot of our students, either they might not have the skill set to do something like this without their parents, or their parents just might not feel comfortable having them go without some kind of supervision or that kind of thing. So that's what our cohorts are. That's how they work. That's what we're going to focus on this episode, is how we work on all the executive functioning skills along with all the social skills, because that's our jam. That's what we do. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. So we've been doing cohorts for about a year now, right?
I don't even remember. Has it been 2 years?
I think you're right. It's been a while. We've been doing cohorts for
I think it's been 2
long
years,
time.
actually. Yeah.
The
whole concept of time. I don't know.
Right. But all the students who are involved in our cohorts love it. The general so like overall, we've gone to places like Dave and Buster's, different arcades. If there's a trampoline park in San Antonio, we've been there. We went to the zoo one time. We've been to the aquarium a couple times. Our students love like doing new things, or like going out into the community and doing things with each other.
We've done painting classes.
Yes.
We did Halloween at a theme park at Morgan's Wonderland. Yeah. I mean, pretty much anywhere that involves pizza we've been to. A mini golf. We've done mini golf. Yeah, lots of cool different stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And
We did that Mario Andretti race cart place.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we've been to so many different places, and they have all been the students' ideas. So basically, when they come in for our planning sessions, the first thing that they do is they let the group know like what ideas they have, like where they would want to go, and we basically make like a big list of all the different places that people suggest, and both groups actually, and even when we had all three groups, they all agreed that they would rather just vote and like make their way through the list and like basically decide where to go on the amount of people who want to go to each one. So it has definitely involved a lot of flexibility when we decide where we're going to end up going. But every single time, everyone is happy with the decision. Even the students who pick something that doesn't get chosen that week, they bring it up the following time, and most of the time they end up getting chosen, or their suggestion ends up getting chosen for that outing.
And I wanted to add to that too. I remember when we first started cohorts, some of the kids asked if they could just not go if it was somewhere they didn't want to go.
Mhm.
And now that was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That was actually when we had an adult group and somebody asked, well, can I just not go? And that has actually never happened in the couple of years that we've been doing this.
Mhm.
Nobody has ever just not shown up because it wasn't somewhere that they wanted to go.
Right.
So I don't know that we've ever even thought about that or talked about that. But since
Yeah.
you were bringing that up, we've never had that happen, that somebody said, oh, I didn't want to go do that, so I just didn't go.
Right.
Obviously, sometimes students don't go because of schedule conflicts and things like that, but
Mhm.
never just because they just don't. As far as I'm aware,
You're absolutely correct.
maybe
Yeah.
somebody, maybe there's conversations happening at home that we're not aware of, but
That's
as
true.
far as we're aware,
Mhm.
there's never been a student who just didn't go because they just didn't want to.
Right. Absolutely. But yeah, so overall, the students do decide as a group like where they would like to go for their outing. And then, yeah, like as Steph said, at that point, we had to figure out how much it would cost, if there's like admission tickets or something like that. If we're going to an arcade, how much money should we bring for arcade cards? If we're going to be eating dinner there, how much money should we bring for dinner? So all the budgeting gets mapped out as well during that planning session. And, they figure out like if like it's far away, like if the location is far away from their home, or if they're going to have to come from school or something like that. They figure out all that, all the logistics behind the outing experience. So it is not my responsibility to let their parents know where we're going to be going. We leave it up to all the students to figure out a way to present the information to their parents. The majority of the students have phones, and so they figured, oh, let me just take a picture, because I take all the notes on my computer, and so I just have like a Google Doc of like where we're going, based on what we had planned out. And so the students thought it would be a great idea to just take a picture of the Google Doc and then send it to their mom or send it to their dad, or at least take a picture of it to show their parents when they get home. So that way they are the ones who are directly telling their parents, okay, so we're going to be meeting here. This is how much money it's going to cost. This is what I have to wear if we have to wear like trampoline socks or whatever it might be. And so that takes me out of the equation of being I guess like responsible for,
the messenger.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Not to say I don't send a reminder to parents, because, just in case, once they meet for the planning session, they don't do their outing for 2 weeks. And so I might send a reminder like the day of, saying, hey, just a reminder, this is what we went over in our planning session. But ultimately it is up to the students to let their parents know where they're going to be going for the cohort outing. Sometimes students miss our planning sessions, and so they are not aware of where we're going unless they're able to figure out how to get that information. The cool thing about our groups is that a lot of the students connect with each other outside of the cohorts or outside of Starfish Social Club. And so they have each other's phone numbers, or they have like their parents have each other's phone numbers and things like that. So what typically happens is if a student is out, either someone in the group volunteers to send that person the information because they know that they have to get the information regardless, or the person who is out asks someone else who is in the group if they can send them the information. That actually just happened this past week with our planning session. So again, it is not up to me to send those parents whose students weren't at the planning session the information. It is still up to that student to figure out how to get all the information so that way they can still pass it along to their parents. So all that in itself is a lot of responsibility, a lot of different skills that have to be learned when it comes to planning ahead with transportation, with the money, and also just making sure that their parents are aware, because students who aren't old enough to drive yet obviously need a ride somewhere, and so they have to make sure that their parents' schedule works out with that as well. And so there's just so many things behind the scenes that our cohorts help our students with. It's really cool. I'm trying to think, can you think of anything else for the planning sessions?
Yeah, I think that's it as far as planning. I think a couple times we've needed to have a plan B. I think maybe if we have an outdoor plan, because again, as Romero mentioned, there's a 2-week gap. And so, if the weather changes, there was one time the place we do 6 to 8 and they closed at 7. So we had to change it to 5 to 7, but we weren't sure. 5 is early for a lot of the kids and their parents. So there've been a couple times where we've needed to come up with a plan B, either in case the weather didn't work out or in case the logistics didn't work out and we weren't ever able to go. And in the times that that's happened, it's been the same thing. The kids have, agreed on the plan B, and then they've had just 2 things to communicate. And then we just, communicated, okay, we're good with plan A, we're sticking to this plan.
Right.
But we have had that happen too, just like a contingency plan, so there's never a time where we don't go. There's if something interferes, like weather or like a time change or whatever, then we just plan around it.
Absolutely. Oh, one thing that the students who don't have phones, they choose to write down all the information that I have on my computer. So that way they can still pass along the paper to their parents. That also happened this past week with our planning session, where the student, this student actually, he doesn't really write well. He's not able to write. And so what I did was I just asked him to tell me what he sees on the computer so I can write it down for him. And so I was asking, okay, so where are we going? And what time are we going to be there? And what's the address? How much money do you need? Basically everything that I already saw on the computer, I asked him so that way he can at least read it to me and let me know what to write for him. So even that is an opportunity for our students to still learn the responsibility of making sure that they have all the information they need to pass along to their parents.
And he has such an amazing memory. I bet he remembered it just from you guys talking about it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
The only other thing I would add to the planning is that we do have a requirement. We noticed that we were kind of getting stuck going to the same places on repeat. And so we do now have a requirement that every other adventure has to be somewhere that we have not been before, for that specific cohort. So maybe the other cohort has been there, but this group hasn't. So we work on modules here. We have 5 modules throughout the year. So during the course of a module, the cohorts have 2 outings that they go on during the course of the module. So one of them can be anywhere, that we've already gone, but Dave and Buster's and trampoline parks are just kind of the defaults. Oh my gosh, these kids love a trampoline park.
Yes.
But then the other time that we go somewhere has to be somewhere that this particular group has not been before. And so that's been really cool. Again, we live in a big city. And so, we sometimes will get on Groupon. You can look at Facebook events. I mean, there's different ways to find things to do. We go on Mondays, just for context. Ramiro and I appreciate our weekends. And so our cohorts go on Mondays, which on the one hand means sometimes things are closed, and sometimes they close early. And so it's not an option. On the other hand, it means it's usually not crowded. Maybe sometimes we'll run into a birthday party somewhere, but other than that, places are generally not crowded. And we've even gone, Columbus Day, President's Day, some of the holidays like that. But because we go in the evenings, it's usually not an issue. But that's the other thing is every other time. So basically once a month, we're going somewhere that this group has not gone before.
Yeah. And so when we are at the outings, man, like me and Steph just like talking about this right before we started recording, there's a lot that goes into cohorts that I don't think of off the top of my head. There's a lot that happens and a lot that the students get to learn and work on and strengthen just by going to an arcade or going to a trampoline park. It's really cool to see. There are so many things that happen in the moment that we may not prepare for, or we may not plan on, that we get to help the students work through.
It's like, imagine as a parent, if you just dropped your child off at an arcade or a trampoline. Like that's how we are with the students. We are there to facilitate and support, but we definitely are not there to take the place of their parent. And so if you can think about your child right now, and if you were to just drop them off somewhere, how successful would they be with that? So that's what we encounter, right? Our students have not always had that experience before of being completely responsible for themselves. So that's basically the stance that Ramiro and I take, is that our kids are responsible for themselves. And so, yeah, we basically spend 2 hours kind of reinforcing that concept and all the different things that come up across those 2 hours. How can we help our students be as independent and responsible and functional as possible?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess first, overall, we are there as a group. All right. So if we're at an arcade, all the students are expected to play games with at least one other person. If we're at a trampoline park, they're expected to be hanging out or jumping with at least one other person in our group. Wherever we go, our students are told and reminded that they are here as a group. And so they're not just hanging out by themselves or on their phones or going off and doing whatever they want to by themselves. They have to be with at least one other student. And so that concept allows them to strengthen their relationships with each other, and also understand that they have to be aware of their surroundings and be aware of who they're with, and that they can't just like be off in their own little world, or like go off without having to be responsible in that sense.
And that's what would happen if they went somewhere with a friend, right? That it would be kind of a strain on that relationship if they just went off and were doing whatever they wanted to, if they went with a friend or a friend's family. And so we really try to replicate the social expectations that would be in place if this was obviously it's a bit of a contrived situation, but if it was an authentic, pure situation, we try to replicate what the expectations would be. So like I said, if they were to go, even a lot of our kids are older, if this was a date, it would be probably not a second date if they were just wandering off and going and doing whatever they wanted to. So we're really just trying to replicate authentic social interactions, that when you go somewhere with other people, the expectation is usually that if everybody's not together, at least small pods of people are together.
Absolutely. And so usually where we go, there's either some kind of admission, whether it's a ticket to get into the aquarium, or you have to purchase an arcade card to to play games at the arcade. And so I feel like a lot of our students, maybe in the past, like if they were to go somewhere with their parents or with other people's parents or something like that, the parents or the adults that they're with would do all the talking for them. At the counter, they would purchase the card for them. They would get the wristband for them, or whatever it might be. And so I know at first, when our students started coming to cohorts, they expected Steph or myself to do all the talking for them. But as they get older and as they start to do things in the community and do things with other people outside their family, it's important for them to learn how to advocate for themselves and learn the responsibility of purchasing those things without needing help from other people. And so, of course, I'm there at the counter, or Steph is there at the counter, but whenever the employee asks our students what they want, or even if they ask me or Steph what our students want, we always look to the students and ask them, all right, what would you like to purchase? How much money do you want on your arcade card? or what else do you have to get? We never answer the questions directly with the employee. We're always making sure that the students are the ones who are communicating with the employee. For some students, they were able to pick this up really quickly. Others, they might, take a little bit of time to have to like think through it or process through it, and they might need some help with that in that sense. But overall, it's very important for our students to learn how to, I guess, like how to be responsible for those types of things.
Mhm.
And that also crosses over to if we were sitting down to have dinner. Like if the arcade has like a restaurant in it, or if we are going somewhere to get food for our cohort, the students ordered for themselves. And so again, with talking or communicating directly with the waiter or the waitress, or whoever it might be, it is up to them to let them know like what they want to eat. Me and Steph aren't taking everyone's orders just so we can repeat it to the waiter or waitress. It is direct one-on-one communication with the student and the employee.
Yeah, and that's how we get orders of chicken wings and fries and a sundae and a Dr. Pepper and a this and a this.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah. Do you want to go to the budget? Because I think that's a great segue into, I don't even see it now, but like, paying attention to the budget.
Yeah. So when they are,
I do. Oh, can I share my funny story? Okay.
yes.
So this was 2 weeks ago. We were at a trampoline park, and one of the kids wanted to get a drink. And so he struggles a little bit with his language skills and things. And so some of our kids, we just let go, on their own. We know that they're self-sufficient. And then some of them we know need need some support. So I went with him to the counter, and he wanted a icy or slushy or whatever the things are that come out of the machine. And so they had medium and large. And while we were waiting for the guy to be available, he kept pointing at the large one, right? And in my mind, I'm like, absolutely not. First of all, we're still jumping, right? But he's a little guy also. There just was no reason.
Yeah.
So we get to the counter, and the guy asks him what he wants. And he shows him the slushy or the icy or whatever. And he said, what size? And so the kiddo, or he said medium or large. And so of course the kiddo says large. And I look at the guy and I said, medium, please. And so then I'm talking to the student while the guy's getting his drink ready, and we're just having a conversation. And I look up, and he's got the large cup. And so I said to him, I asked for a medium. And he kind of looked at me. He said, I charged you for a medium. Don't worry about it. And I was like, no, we have a misunderstanding. I wasn't worried about how much it costs. I just did not want this child to be drinking a large icy while he's jumping at a trampoline park. So that is just really funny, because the guy was just going out of his way to be helpful, right? And considerate. And like, he thought he was doing
a favor.
Yeah. And really, I didn't want this kiddo to have such a ginormous drink.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was funny. Luckily, he didn't end up drinking at all, but I was just like, oh man, I know you're trying to be helpful, but that was kind of the opposite of helpful.
Yeah, so like when it comes to budgeting, we do have a general estimate of like how much money the students want to bring or should bring depending on where we're going, and typically the students will bring around that amount, but we remind them that it's very important to budget, because if they're paying for arcade cards and then they run out of money on the cards, they might want to spend more money and put more money on the card. But then if we're eating dinner like during the second half of the 2 hours, that means that they still have to have enough money to be able to pay for their food. And so I'm trying to think, because I want to say that there maybe was 1 or 2 times where a student did not budget properly, and so they spent all their money on their arcade
I remember it was at main event, or one of the ones where we bowl, because I remember who it was too.
I think I remember
that he ran out of money. And then it's, the typical conversation that Ramiro and I have with the kids, like, okay, what's your plan? And I remember it was this whole long drawn out conversation because our objective was to help him problem solve.
Mhm.
Right. I think it was, so he recognized he didn't have any money and he had to pay for dinner because he'd
Mhm.
already ordered and eaten,
Mhm.
but hadn't paid for it yet.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of the sticking point, is that he didn't have the money to pay for the food he had already ingested. And so I'm trying to remember, I feel like I documented it somewhere. Because it was a very drawn out conversation, getting him to the point of recognizing he ended up realizing he could ask somebody for money.
Mhm.
And so then it was, okay, who do you want to ask? Right. And kind of going through that. And I think he asked one of us. He ended up asking one of us.
Mhm.
But it was definitely, I can't remember the beginning of that conversation. Do you remember? I remember it was a lot of questioning, helping him understand that he had to pay for the food. He couldn't
Mhm.
just walk away.
Mhm.
But there was so much more to it that I can't remember. This was months ago.
Yeah.
There was so much more to it that I can't remember right now. But basically the point was helping him solve the problem. So it's not, oh, let me just give you the money to cover that, right? Like, let me just put that on my whatever. It's never our problem to solve.
Mhm.
We're here to help and we're here to facilitate, but it is not our problem to solve.
Mhm.
So I just remember talking through that conversation with him, and him finally, getting to the point where he realized he could ask somebody for money, and he ended up asking one of us. And then we just made a plan for, okay, how do we get our money back?
Mhm.
Right. And so then when he got picked up that evening, he was able to explain it and whatever.
Mhm.
There might have been a second time that happened too, but that's the one that sticks out in my head so much, because it was a really great problem solving conversation.
Yeah.
Right. Taking him from having no idea what to do in a situation like that
Mhm.
to where now, if he were in a situation like that again, he would know,
Mhm.
what some of his options were.
Yeah, absolutely. And also what I have noticed when it comes to our students spending the money or like having to purchase a card or whatever it might be, they when they're told the total of like how much it costs, they don't always take the time to count out the money that they're giving to the employee. Like let's say that the wristband costs $12. Students sometimes hand them two 20s,
Mm-hmm.
two $20 bills, or they'll hand them, like whatever amount their parents gave them, they'll just hand them the entire thing. And so I always make sure to take a second and be like, oh, wait, hang on. So if the total is $12, that means all you have to give them is one $20 bill. Or I help them work through the change, or like help them work through like the amount of money that they have versus how much whatever they bought costs. Um
And I think so much of that is that we're such a plastic society now. I
yeah.
mean, I'm actually surprised that almost all of them even bring cash every time,
Mhm.
because I don't operate in cash. And so I think so much of that is that I'm sure they don't see their parents using cash,
Right.
like we just, as a society, it's just not really a thing anymore. But it also means that you lose the concept of money,
Mhm.
right? You lose the concept of the value of money. And it's kind of like using a analog clock,
Mhm.
right? A lot of our students, we have analog clocks here, don't know how to tell time on an analog clock.
Mhm.
So to me, it's this very similar skill to being able to count money. It's not a skill that's really that necessary anymore, because
Right.
you're just using plastic most of the time. But I think it shows that a lot of our kids don't really have the concept of the value of money, which is a different conversation than being able to count money.
Mhm.
So even if they're not able to count money, it's really important to us that they understand the difference between $15 and $40,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. And so it definitely also relates to the students being able to keep track of the money that they do have with them and the rest of their belongings. I feel like naturally parents would pay for their students, or like they would pay whatever it costs, whenever they're going places like that. So a lot of times our students aren't necessarily familiar with having to be in charge of their own money. So something that we've definitely been working through with one of the groups in particular is, well, I guess no, both groups, absolutely both groups. One thing we've been working on, especially recently, is helping the students remember to keep track of their own stuff. One student in particular tends to like have money from his parents, and he will just leave it on the counter at the place, or leave it on a table, or not even thinking twice about, okay, this is money, this has value, what's going to happen if I leave it on a counter in a public place.
Last time I actually watched him just walk up and put it on a table and walk away. It's just like, and Ramiro and I were talking about how, I imagine parents give their kids money, and then when they get home, they just give them whatever change they have back. Right. And so there's no real ownership of that money. Like if they were to lose $10 while they were at the cohort, I don't know that they would even notice, and their parent might not know, because their parent doesn't always know what they spend. So it's almost like there's just no responsibility or accountability for keeping track of their money, if that makes sense.
Right. And so where was I going with that?
Well, we have the same with phones, purses. For Ramiro and me, our expectation is we're not in charge of anybody's stuff except our own. Because if you imagine, like, one of our cohorts is 8 or 9 students, like, we're not about to be standing on the sidelines holding 9 phones, or, whatever the case may be. The only time I did that was at the Andretti thing, when we realized like the kids couldn't take their phones, and I'm holding 9 phones. But other than that, I'm not responsible for your purse. I'm not responsible for your money. I'm not responsible for your game card. Right. That, I think, for almost all the kids has been something they've had to get used to. So even, a lot of our kids wear like leggings or athletic shorts that might not have pockets. So that's been something that's come up recently. When we plan for the outing, what are you going to wear so that you have somewhere to put your phone or your money or your wallet? Purses. And we have had some times where people have left things behind. One time we knew about it. We knew that a student left her phone in one part of the place where we were, and we had all moved to another part. And so we went through that problem solving process. Does everybody have their phone? Oh, you don't have your phone. Where could your phone be? Right. Like that whole thing. Another time, I was standing at the counter, and a stranger came to turn a phone in that they had found, and I recognized it as belonging to one of our kids. They had left it. We were at an arcade, and they had left it at one of the games, and this person found it and went and turned it in. And I just happened to be standing at the counter when he did it. We've had definitely some of our kids are really learning the concept of being responsible for their stuff. And I think, sometimes it comes from parents just being used to holding on to that stuff, or picking up after the kids as we've moved on. So now we make does everybody have their phone? Does everybody have their money? If you don't, where was the last place you were? Right. We had a student lost their wallet at it. I think he left it on the table where we were eating, if I'm remembering. He left it somewhere, and we actually I don't think we ever recovered it. He ended up leaving his contact info for the place where we were. So we've had stuff like that happen too. But it's, Ramiro and I are not responsible for the kids' money, for their phones. If we're going to a trampoline park, they've got cubbies, lockers. Oh, we've done escape rooms. We've done, so most of the places that we go where you don't really want to be carrying around a lot of stuff, they'll have cubbies or lockers or that kind of thing. Just the concept of keeping up with our own belongings. And sometimes, like, one of the students will bring like headphones. Well, great. Now for 2 hours, you get to be responsible for headphones. I'm not talking about noise canceling headphones. I'm talking about, like, he brings them to jam out, right? But then now for 2 hours he's walking around with these headphones.
It's interesting because I feel like it used to be expected, like in our students' perspectives, they used to expect us to just take their things. I remember there were a couple times where a student would like try to give me her purse and be like, "What do you want me to do with that? I don't want your purse." Or another student would just like hold out his phone and his wallet, and again, I'd be like, I don't want your stuff. What do you want me to do with it?" And so they're like, "Oh, okay," and then they start processing through like what they actually have to do with it. So that way they can keep it safe, but maybe they don't want to hold on to it the whole time. So we're always working through those kinds of things in the moment when they come up. So that, yeah, it is super cool to, um, to see the students learn how to be responsible in that sense. And if they do leave us somewhere, or if they do, need help or ask for help for something, then, of course it's always a matter of just being able to work through it.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah. All right. So that is a really great, I know we have kids waiting for us. That is a really great summary of our cohorts and all the different things that we work on. Hopefully it gave you some ideas of maybe ways that you can support your kids or your students in being a little more independent as well. Just probably things that you might not have even ever thought about, but when your kiddo is with somebody else who's not you, those things become a lot more obvious and apparent. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next time.